I know that Rome wasn't built in a day, and I certainly didn't think that the Bruins were going to solve all of their problems on day one of free agency or through free agency at all. In fact, I hope that they didn't. I'm just curious what their long-term plan is to help this blue line.
You're listening to the PuckUps Podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 52 of the PuckUps Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for joining me. Day one of NHL Free Agency is in the books, and so on today's show, we'll take a look back at the moves the Boston Bruins did make and try to make sense of it all. And have they improved on paper already this offseason since the conclusion of last season? All of that and much more. But first things first, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And to get in touch with me or be a part of the show, you can email me at info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X at BrianDFelice_. You can tweet at the show at the PuckUps, or leave a comment on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere the show has a social media account and post content. Now, for those expecting any pre-4th of July fireworks from the Boston Bruins on day one of free agency, you would be sadly mistaken. It was a relatively quiet day for the Boston Bruins, and perhaps that's a good thing. There have been some years past where the Bruins were pretty big spenders on July 1, and it didn't really turn out according to plan. So maybe allowing other teams around the league be big spenders on a UFA class that was rather unimpressive might be best for business for the Boston Bruins. Ironically, the bigger moves the Bruins made on July 1st, the opening of free agency, were trades, including sending Joonas Korpisalo to the New York Rangers for a 4th-round draft pick in 2028 and a prospect. They also traded for right-shot defenseman Will Borgen of the New York Rangers for a 2027 second-round draft pick and a 2028 conditional 3rd-round draft pick, the condition being that it turns into a second-rounder should the Bruins reach the Eastern Conference Finals in either of the next 2 years, while Borgen plays at least 50% of those games. And then the really only notable free agent signing was Connor Clifton. Old friend Connor Clifton coming back to Boston on a 2-year deal with an AAV of $2.25 million. So a relatively quiet day for the Bruins, and as I said, perhaps a good thing. We're going to hear some comments from Don Sweeney from his press conference throughout this episode. Let's start off with his opening statement on the moves that the Bruins did make.
We look at it like as a successful day for the Boston Bruins. Over the last little bit, we addressed some areas that we wanted to attack, and today was more focused on the back end. But we feel good about the depth of our hockey club now, and some of the conversations, obviously, they'll extend beyond today, and you just never know what might surface between now and throughout the year. But we did address the areas that we felt we needed to, and we need to continue to do that as we go forward to be a better club.
Don, you do have lots of depth on the back end. Do you envision going into training camp with that depth, or could there be another move coming here?
Yeah, I mean, there easily could be, depending on where other teams sit and the conversations I've had. Charlie's not playing the first 6 games. You just never know between now and when we start, and injuries. We just, it was an area we told you guys we were going to address, and that's exactly what we tried to do.
You got to love that victory lap there by Donnie. Yeah, I know. We told you we were going to address the defense, and that's exactly what we did. It's like, yeah, Don, I don't know if signing Connor Clifton and trading for Will Borgen is what people had in mind. But yes, no, you did address the right side technically. And listen, I don't dislike either of those players. I'm not as familiar with Borgen because bit of a later bloomer. I think he was a 2015 draft pick. He played in Seattle, played in New York with the Rangers. I've watched some tape of him since the Bruins acquired him, and yeah, he's fine. He seems fine to me. He strikes me as a third pair, second pair tweener, can kind of play in either role but is probably more suited on a third pair on a deeper blue line. So stop me if you've heard that before when we're talking about a D-core that had Andrew Peeke and Henry Jokiharju as the second and third pair right shot defenseman last year. So again, do I think Borgen can be an upgrade over Andrew Peeke? Sure. I don't doubt that. And do I think Connor Clifton is an upgrade over Jokiharju? Well, I think so. I mean, they're different types of players, but based on how Marco Sturm wants the Bruins to operate, and he's just a different type of player than Jokiharju. So yeah, like if you insert Borgen and Clifton over Peeke and Jokiharju, which Jokiharju is still rostered, so that's something that they have to figure out, then yeah, I think that the Bruins defense is marginally better on the right side. And maybe they could be much better. Like maybe Borgen's a way better upgrade than Peeke. I really don't know yet. So I don't hate them in a vacuum. I do think the Bruins defense core is a bit crowded with guys right now. No real huge impact difference makers. I mean, as Don said in that clip, they're without Charlie McAvoy for the first 6 games next year. And that's, at the time, it wasn't talked about much because the Bruins just got eliminated from the playoffs, and it was quite literally right towards the end of regulation. But not being with McAvoy for the first 6 games next year, that's a big deal because, teams can get off to bad starts, and now you're battling uphill early in the year, and you don't want that, especially in what's expected to be a very difficult Atlantic division. So that was a bit of a bonehead play by McAvoy, and he's a reason why his team are going to get off to a challenging start, I would say, because now you're talking about a right side start in the year, which is Borgen and Clifton and Jokiharju. Now, maybe if Lorai's still around, he plays right or left. I really don't know. Maybe Frederick Brunet or Jonathan Aspro can play the right side despite being a left shot. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And obviously, it's still early July, so we'll see what the roster looks like as the summer goes on here, and certainly throughout training camp and heading into the regular season. So I don't dislike either player. I'm curious if they had to trade for Borgen. I mean, I know they had to trade for him logistically because he was under contract with the Rangers, but what I'm wondering is, could they have acquired a free agent similar to his profile without giving up the assets? That's my question. I mean, a second rounder and a third rounder that could be another second rounder, that's nothing to scoff at. So Borgen better be a player. And I don't know, could you have found another third pair, second pair tweener right shot in free agency? Just a question. And then Connor Clifton, 2 years at 2.25. We all know what Clifton brings. He works his ass off. He's physical. He has a bit of a motor. So I like Clifton at that cap hit. I also don't mind the term. He's 31 years old, so 2 years isn't a big deal. My question with the Bruins is their defense right now. Like I said, it's very crowded with a bunch of guys, right? Charlie McAvoy is obviously their top pair defenseman, their top defenseman overall. Hampus Lindholm, we'll see which Lindholm we get, right? Like there were times where Hampus Lindholm was kind of a 1B in Boston, but ever since his knee injury, and then he had a foot fracture last year, and he's getting older, Lindholm's strength is historically his skating. And in a league that's getting younger and faster, and Lindholm's getting older and a bit more injured, does his strength kind of get negated as time goes on here? But either way, Lindholm has the potential to be obviously he's a legit top 4D man, that's for sure, right? So you like Charlie, you like Lindholm. Zadorov, I think Zadorov is capable of playing top 4 minutes, but we'll see how they use him. So I like those 3 players. They each bring an element to their game that says, okay, these guys should be in the top 4, or could be at least, right? More specifically in terms of Zadorov. But then you have just a bunch of guys, right? You have Borgen, you have Jokiharju, you have Clifton, That's the right side. And then on the left side, in terms of natural handedness, you have Lohrei and Jordan Harris, who they also brought back on a 1-year deal for $850. And you have Frederick Brunet, who Don Sweeney has now mentioned multiple times, once prompted, once unprompted, which was today, about Brunet getting a legit NHL chance. And you have Aspero. So right now, on the left side, you have Hampus Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov, Jonathan Aspero, Frederick Brunet, Mason Lohrei, Jordan Harris. On the right side, you have Charlie McAvoy, Will Borgen, Connor Clifton, and Henry Jokiharju. Something has to give there. So I know that we're not far into the off season, and there's other shoes to drop, and I think that stands true for both the Bruins blue line and their forward core. But yeah, I would say right now their D-core is, if I'm comparing it simply to last year, I think if you add in Brunet and then consider the fact that Borgen's an upgrade over Peak and Clifton is, I would say, maybe an upgrade over Jokiharju just in terms of Sturm's system. And obviously Jokiharju's still around, but again, something's got to give there. I think the Bruins D-core is technically going to be better than last year. Where does that leave them in the division? I guess that's, to be determined. But yeah, so in any event, those were some of the signings that the Bruins made and some of the trades that they made. Again, Korpisalo, shedding Korpisalo's contract, which they then in turn used that salary cap space to bring in Clifton and sign Jordan Harris again. So you move out Korpisalo's $3 million and then you bring in Clifton and you re-sign Harris. So that's where that money went to. But even still, like, to move Korpisalo for a 4th-round pick and a prospect, that's more than I think anybody could have possibly expected. I mean, I mentioned on here, could you maybe move him for a 7th-round pick or a 6th-round pick in 2028? Instead, it's a 4th-round pick plus a prospect. So well done to Sweeney there. As far as players in the Bruins that were on the team last year that have moved on to greener pastures, you have Victor Arvidsson, who signed with the Detroit Red Wings on a 2-year deal, $5 million cap hit, which is reportedly what the Bruins offered him. But this one's clear as day. The second the Bruins traded for Peterka, the writing was on the wall, and Arvidsson was no longer a fit for the Bruins. Probably in his mind, because Peterka is going to take those minutes, but also from a Bruins perspective, the Bruins had $7 million. I want to say $7.7 million of cap space heading into day one of free agency post Peterka trade. So technically they could have fit Arvidsson in there, but then you weren't able to address, your blue line. And if the Bruins were able to shed some salary cap space, which they did, moving on from Korpisalo, now you go from 7 million to 10. Are you really going to allocate half of that to Arvidsson? No. So the writing was kind of on the wall there. So Arvidsson's gone. Korpisalo is gone. For what it's worth, Riley Tufte, who was a Providence Bruin, he's now in the New Jersey Devils system. Good luck. Michael Callahan goes to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So good for him. Hopefully he gets a chance in Tampa's system more consistently. We'll see, but maybe he's just a minor leaguer for Syracuse. I guess the jury's out there. But yeah, that's essentially the player movement for the Bruins. Again, in terms of NHL type roster players, like the Bruins did make a handful of signings that I think are more so for Providence / organizational depth, like guys that can go up and down between Boston and Providence if they need to in a pinch, but nobody really worth going over right now. As far as some movement around the league, it's worth mentioning right now some of the close calls that were rumored to go to the Bruins or the Bruins were possibly in on, and they went elsewhere. So, for example, Jacob Trouba, he's the defenseman that the Bruins were possibly linked to, right? Could possibly be a stopgap defenseman in your top 4. He goes to San Jose. Darnell Nurse, mentioned in trade rumors, he said, or it was said that Boston, Pittsburgh, and Philly were the only 3 teams that he was willing to waive his no trade clause to go to. Well, didn't seem like Edmonton was willing to retain salary there. So in order to find a trade partner, Darnell had to expand his trade list that he would go to, and he put on San Jose, and he gets traded to San Jose. No salary cap retained. So two defense options that may have been linked to the Bruins at different times end up both in San Jose, ironically, probably as D partners. So that's interesting. Mason Marchment is a forward that we talked about. Could have been a good fit on the Bruins and some other teams around the league, but he goes to San Jose as well. Rasmus Andersson stays in Vegas, right? So now in terms of impact top 4 defense candidates that the Bruins could have possibly acquired, and you may like these guys, you may not, right? But no doubt that they were upgrades over what they have, right? And, Darnell Nurse, Jacob Trouba, Rasmus Andersson, like him or not, those guys would have been upgrades over Andrew Peeke or, anywhere else in the lineup outside of Charlie or maybe Hampus. But the other guy that's still out there, curious to see what happens with him, is John Carlson. The Carolina Hurricanes traded for his negotiation rights not too long ago, and they weren't able to get a deal done prior to the start of free agency. So John Carlson, who's rumored to want 2 years at $10 million, he's still out there. So I know Carolina traded for his negotiation rights, but now he's fair game to anybody. Again, kind of feels like he might be destined for Tampa. That's what the rumors were before Carolina traded for his negotiation rights, and that's just kind of where it feels like things are going right now. If I had to guess, I'd say Carolina or Tampa. Right now the Bruins have about $5 million or so in cap space available. So technically, could they sign Carlson to a $10 million AAV deal? I don't think they'd have to be cap compliant at the time that they signed him. They just have to be cap compliant by opening night. But that's something to keep an eye on. It just kind of feels like, I just don't know if it's a fit with Boston. I'm not saying he wouldn't help the Bruins, but based off of Sweeney's comments today, you kind of feel like if the Bruins are going to make a $10 million bid for him, maybe they would have found a way to get it done. I don't know. So that's an interesting one to follow. Maverick Bork gets traded from Dallas to Nashville, ironically enough, for the same acquisition cost that the Bruins gave up to get Will Borgen from the Rangers, a 27 second-round pick and a 28 third-round pick. So if you're a Maverick Bork fan over a Will Borgen fan, you might be wondering, why didn't the Bruins go for him? But that opens up cap space for Dallas to re-sign Jason Robertson. Sounds like Zach Werenski. What a wild ride that story has been. Very, very hot and cold situation to the point where he was livid at Columbus and was said to either want to go to only Tampa Bay or Toronto. And then you hear things that cooler heads prevailed, and the Blue Jackets put out a statement with Werenski saying that he only wants to play for Columbus and that he wants to stay there and all that stuff. So, man, it kind of, like I said, that whole situation reminds me of when you're at a Dunkin' Donuts on a Sunday morning and you see a very hungover couple with bedhead and sunglasses on, and you know that they were just screaming at each other drunk the night before outside a Fenway bar waiting for their Uber. Like, that's what the Werenski Columbus situation kind of reminds me of. But in any event, a couple other moves around the league. Sergei Bobrovsky signs with the Toronto Maple Leafs, so they continue to get better this offseason. Anders Lee goes to Utah, Islanders captain. Vinny Trocheck gets traded to the Utah Mammoth as well. So a couple of, Trocheck was, somebody I mentioned I don't want the Bruins being in on. I think the Peterka trade kind of iced that one. So, but that's what we're looking at around the league. And as far as what can transpire over the coming days, it just feels like, as I said off the top, this UFA class was not very impressive. And Don Sweeney even talked about that too. And he mentioned how the league is kind of changing.
Just compared to years past, this post-July 1st window, do you think you and other managers will still be active in terms of trade conversations more so than in past years?
I hope I referenced prior to that there were a lot more aggressive conversations going on, with particular players in the trade scenarios. So I think that's possibly the newer landscape. There'll always be free agency. The players will always change. And, Mick's point of saying, some teams are still going deep in those situations. So I don't think that's ever going to change when a player hits there and they have the opportunity to change teams. But the trade scenarios seem to be coming up a little more prevalently in terms of where a team is at and what you're targeting, and player movement may become a little more aggressive pursuit.
So it does sound like, again, I know it was a pretty quiet day for the Bruins in terms of, free agency. And again, there are a lot of trade rumors out there. So people were expecting some trades to happen too. Like the Darnell Nurse one, it felt like that was going to be a trade that could go down for the Bruins. But I guess what I take away from these comments are, like GMs aren't looking to make big impactful changes to their teams anymore via free agency because the league is changing, right? A lot, like, again, you see it with players requesting trades, the salary cap going up, so teams can afford their free agents more often, even before their contracts are expired. And truly, just top end players just don't hit the open market anymore. It's not something that happens too frequently. Look back at Zdeno Chara when Chara went to Boston. I mean, perhaps the greatest free agency signing of all time, right? Like that was a franchise-altering free agency acquisition. You just don't see that out there very much anymore. So I guess I look at the Bruins day one of free agency and I see their additions, and I know that Rome wasn't built in a day. And I certainly didn't think that the Bruins were going to solve all of their problems on day one of free agency or through free agency at all. In fact, I hope that they didn't. I'm just curious what their long-term plan is to help this blue line. And I'm not talking this year specifically because I think their decor is fine entering next season in terms of being a competitive group. Do I think they're the best decor in the league? No. Do I think that they need another truly impactful top pair defenseman, or at least top four? Yeah, I do. But if you want to sell me on McAvoy and Lindholm and Zadorov and Borgen and Lohrei, Brunet and Yoki Hart, like all these guys, yeah, like I think they'll have a good, competent decor. But like, what's their plan to add another true impact guy in their top four? Because it's not free agency. I mean, maybe it's John Carlson, but again, that's like a short-term thing. I'm talking long-term. Who's their next stud to play alongside McAvoy or learn under him or whatever? Because he's not coming through free agency. They haven't drafted that guy yet, I don't think. I mean, Vasek Blanar is a promising defense prospect, but he's got at least 2 or 3 more years before he even thinks about turning pro. And again, I'm not hinging my bets on him. He might just be a third pair guy. He might just be the next Lohrei with a bit more upside. So is it a hockey trade? And if it's a trade, am I crazy in thinking that the Bruins are just winging that? Because trades, you don't always know what trades could be until they form, right? Like Don Sweeney might just be hoping that the Bruins can land a nice hockey trade at some point in the next few years, but he doesn't know what that trade is. So is that a plan or is that just wishful thinking? Like, I don't know. I don't think the Bruins know. I don't think the Bruins have a clear-cut plan to truly upgrade their D in a meaningful way. Kind of get like a 3-headed dragon, like, McAvoy, a new acquisition, and then Zadorov or Lindholm. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like they need another big-time guy. And maybe it's John Carlson in the short term. I just don't think it's him coming to Boston. I think he goes somewhere else. But in any event, I'm just curious. Like, what is the Bruins' long-term plan to add an impact defenseman, a true impact defenseman, while McAvoy and Pasternak are still having some good years left? It's kind of why, I didn't really harp on it too much, but the Olin Zellweger trade from Anaheim to Buffalo, the Bruins could have pulled that off and pulled off the Peterka trade. Like, Zellweger did not go for much to Buffalo. And yeah, he had a nice little payday extending in Buffalo, in Buffalo on July 1. But still, like, Zellweger, I would have loved that. And he didn't go for much. So I'm curious what the Bruins' plan is. There could still be some trades to happen, but right now, their blue line just kind of feels like you have Charlie McAvoy, who, listen, Charlie's, say what you want about him. He has his detractors, but he's a top 15 defenseman in the league. He was 13th in Norris voting this past season. So when he's on his game, he's a top 15 defenseman. And then beyond him, it's like you have Hampus Lindholm. What is Hampus? Is Hampus Lindholm the 1B type guy that he was a couple of years ago? Or is he just a good second pair guy now? What's Nikita Zadorov? Is he a second pair guy, a third pair guy, right? Like, and they're all kind of aging. Like Charlie's 28, going on 29. Lindholm's in his 30s. Zadorov is in his 30s. Lohrei, he can't defend a traffic cone, at least defensively. Brunet, I'm high on him, but he hasn't played an NHL game yet. And what's his ceiling? Connor Clifton, he's a third pair depth guy at this point in his career. Will Borgen's a second pair, third pair guy. Yoki Haru, third pair guy. Extra Demon, Aspero, ideally third pair guy, maybe second. I know he played top minutes with Charlie last year, but probably not where he should be. So again, they have a lot of guys, and their top guys are either aging or their best years could be behind them. So again, what's their plan to add an impact guy? I'm just curious about it. And is their plan just to wait for a trade? Waiting's not really, is that a plan, or is that just kind of, can anybody do that? If you were a Bruins GM, could you just wait for a trade to fall into your lap? Sure. So it's like, I don't know. I'm curious about that. I know the Bruins might be more self-aware than some fans give them credit. And maybe the Bruins know that they're not, a contender right now, but how do you get to that point while you still have McAvoy and Pasternak in their primes? Like you're not drafting that kid, because even if you do, he's still 3 to 5 years away probably, because you're talking at least a 2027 draft, which means he's not going to be NHL ready till probably 29, 30 if he hits, right? We just talked about why free agency is not really a good avenue to rely on. So it has to be via trade. So do you know trades until they fall into your lap, or do you not? I don't know. Just food for thought. But in any event, something else I wanted to touch on here too was the moving on of Jonas Korpisalo. And this is something I've been saying all offseason had to happen. I was kind of clamoring for this at times last year too. But to Korpisalo's credit, he was good for the Bruins at times, and he was good down the stretch too when Swayman kind of faltered at times. So, he was fine last year for the Bruins, but you just don't need to be spending $3 million to be sitting on your bench for 55 games or so. So, especially when you have the 2-time AHL goalie of the year in the wings, and it's like you have to start to give guys who have earned it in the minors, when players have done all they can do at the level below, and there's an opportunity for them to move up, incentivize players, like reward them for doing everything that you hope they possibly could have done and then some. So I'm glad they gave DiPietro this nod of confidence, and let's see what happens. And let's see what Don Sweeney had to say about that.
Don, in the years you've had this job, going back to goaltending for a second, the years you've had this job, you've been adamant about having experience at that position, at the goaltender position, starter, backup, bringing in Halak a few years ago. This will be the first time you've got a kid this raw. He doesn't have, I don't think he has 200 minutes in the NHL. Is that a concern for you, or you're totally convinced that the AHL experience is enough? We're convinced in our confidence level of Michael and the body of work that he's put in, the work that he's put in, deserve the opportunity. He's going to have to take advantage of it. Obviously, Yuri Patera's coming in. He's got some NHL experience. Simon's played well in the American Hockey League. So we feel comfortable with our depth of our goaltending. We went through this. You just laid out the fact that we've gone through these periods. Vladar's an NHL goaltender, just, signed a long-term extension. We moved off of that when we were in this pivot point of Sway and he, not necessarily either one of them had it at that time. Brandon, congratulations to him. He just won the Stanley Cup. So we've been in this position. We've looked at it, and Bob and Dunny in particular, they feel really confident Michael's ready for this.
That's good to hear. Truly, it's good to hear that the Bruins made the choice to go with DiPietro as the backup. There's there's no doubt in my mind that DiPietro can be a solid NHL backup. I mean, guys, they're a dime a dozen. NHL backups, they're a dime a dozen. You don't have to spend $3 million for one. You don't always have to go out there and get the NHL journeyman suitcase veteran to be that guy that the Bruins have done forever. Ever. The last 20 plus years, the Bruins backups are always journeymen, whether it was Manny Fernandez or Chad Johnson or, I mean, there's honestly too many to go through right now, but the Bruins, Anton Hudobin, it's always somebody. It's always somebody. And again, when you have a guy in the minors that's proving he can step up at the next level, obviously he has to prove that still, but proving that he should have the opportunity to showcase himself at the next level, I think you have to do it. Now, yeah, I think Dan Vladar popping off in Philly, getting an extension with them as their guy. I think Brandon Bussey helping Carolina win a Stanley Cup, including the clinching game. Yeah, I think it's a bit of humble pie for the Bruins to see their goalies going elsewhere and having success, especially goalies that were spending all their time in Providence and never as a true backup in Boston. So, yes, it's a good sign that the Bruins are learning from them. I guess mistakes or past judgments, I suppose you want to call it. So, again, I like the Korpisalo trade. I will give the Bruins credit there. And to get a fourth rounder and a prospect, even if that prospect turns out to be nothing, honestly, just getting the Rangers to take on Korpisalo's entire contract was a win by me. What the Bruins did with that new cap space and bringing in Clifton and Jordan Harris, yeah, it's not earth-shattering, but hey, there's an example, right? Instead of Korpisalo on your bench for 50-plus games, now it's Connor Clifton and Jordan Harris. Now, maybe Harris is an extra guy, and maybe Clifton's an extra guy too. We'll see what happens. But again, you brought back two guys for the price of one, and that one guy's on the bench for most of the year. So it's a good move by the Bruins. Now, I will say I'm a little bit confused right now because the Bruins roster is tough to figure out. And when I say tough to figure out, I mean personnel-wise, I'm not sure what to make of it. And I'll explain what I mean in a second. But first, let's hear what Don Sweeney had to say about what he thinks about the Bruins roster from 30,000 feet post day one of free agency.
Like 30,000 foot assessment of where this team is with the moves that you made, the additions, just sort of where you are right now looking ahead to next season.
Yeah, I can't handicap, relative to other teams. We feel like we address some of the needs. We want to continue to improve. We probably I have some work to do to continue to add to our club. And a little bit of that is based on what's the internal growth, And again, I pointed out a few of those players that are going to be part of that. I think we're back to being a competitive team with a little more balance to hopefully continue to attack the way I described earlier and be a threat. I think we stood here a year ago and wondered whether or not we were going to score enough goals. And, to the players' credit, the coaches' credit, they found ways. Our power play improved. We have a different outlook now with a left one-timer on the elbow. I hope it all comes together. I hope we're right back up the upper echelon. The challenge is we're a 100-point team. We stood here last year, and I don't know whether or not any of us thought we were a bona fide 100-point team, but we went out and did it. And again, players get all the credit, and I'm trying to make sure I supply all the assets as players that we continue to improve because that's the mandate.
I hear what he's saying, and yes, they overachieved last year. Yes, people sat there and said, how are they going to score? Where's the scoring going to come from? And yes, the Bruins found a way to get 100 points and make the playoffs. But here's the thing. This roster to me right now has not improved nearly enough to this point in the summer to be considered anywhere higher than fifth in the division on paper right now. And honestly, that could be high. Like Florida, they missed the playoffs last year. They just went out there and brought in Brady Tkachuk. They get a healthy Alex Barkov back. right? They bring in Radko Gudas. They bring in Jacob Markstrom. Like Florida, if they were healthy, they were in the playoffs last year. And, to be fair to the Bruins, they were wild card 1. And Ottawa was wild card 2. So they would have been technically on the outside looking in had the Panthers made the playoffs somehow, some way. But you have Florida clearly better than the Bruins. You have Montreal better than the Bruins. Buffalo better than the Bruins. Right there, you automatically have the Bruins at 4th, right? Now how about Tampa? Better than the Bruins. Now the Bruins are 5th. Now it's between Toronto, who just brought in Darren Radish and Sergei Bobrovsky and Gavin McKenna. And they brought in some middle six guys to try to help out too, middle six, bottom six guys. So we'll see what happens with Toronto. But between Matthews and Nylander and Nyes and Tavares and Radish, McKenna, Bobrovsky, and again, I don't think Toronto's done, but you can make the case that Toronto on paper is better than Boston right now. You can make the case, right? You can make the case. You still have to go out there and play the games, but you can make the case. Detroit, I would say, especially with the news about Larkin wanting out, I can't imagine Detroit coming back with a roster better than anybody else in the division right now. And that's, they have Lucas Raymond, they have Mo Seider, they have DeBrincat right now. We'll see where Patrick Kane goes. Again, Larkin hasn't been traded yet, but even if he isn't traded, that's not going to be a good situation in the locker room. So I think Detroit enters next year probably the favorite to finish 8th. Ottawa, I think they might take a step back. I don't think they've done a ton. You obviously lose Kachuk, you bring in Eklund, but so maybe it's Detroit 8, Ottawa 7 on paper right now. Maybe Boston 6, Toronto 5, Toronto 6, Boston 5. It's something like that, right? So I just feel like unless somebody like Montreal or Buffalo takes a major step back, or Tampa Bay, I do think Father Time is coming to Tampa Bay. But if John Carlson signs with the Lightning and he pretty much takes over for Darren Radish, and you get Victor Hedman back, and you still have Kucherov and Point and Cirelli and Gensel and Hagel, you still have to put Tampa Bay above the Bruins. So my point is, I think the Bruins, you can make the case the Bruins right now, even as we speak, I think they're better on paper than they were last year. And I still think that there's some shoes to drop. I think they have some fat that they can still trim. I think they can probably try to get rid of Yoki Haru, maybe Asimont, maybe Corrali, maybe Lorai. I don't know. But you have a full sophomore season of Minton, a full sophomore season of Husnadinov, a full freshman year of Hagens. Peterka makes a big difference for them. I still there's a couple of players in the Bruins forward core right now I just don't know what you do with. And when you look at the Bruins roster compared to other teams around the division, again, I mentioned 4 that right now are clear cut ahead of the Bruins, in my opinion. Florida, Buffalo, Montreal, Tampa. Those 4 right now, they're above the Bruins on paper. Toronto, I think you can make the case, but I also think that the Bruins can make a case on paper. And then I think that Detroit and Ottawa are 6 and 7. Or 7 and 8. So the Bruins roster right now, I just don't know what to make of it in certain ways. I talked about the defense earlier. What are your D pairings right now heading into next year? I know McAvoy's out for the first 6 games, but so what do you do? Right now you have is it Lindholm, McAvoy, and then Zadorov, Borgen? Is it Zadorov, McAvoy, Lindholm, Borgen? And then you have 2 spots in the third pair between Lorai, Clifton, Aspero, Yoki Haru, Harris, Brunet, presumably. I don't know what to make of these pairs yet. I don't know what to make of them. And then up front, Casey Middlestad and Elias Lindholm, they just don't fit this Bruins forward core right now. I don't like either one of them where they're slotted. If you look at Puckpedia, they have Elias Lindholm slotted in as first line center. I don't see that happening again. I think Don Sweeney even admitted as much in his press conference a couple weeks back about, yeah, maybe Lindholm is just like, who he is at this point, not a first line center. And so if that's the case, and you have Zacha and Minton and Hagens, like, is Lindholm your top line center? I don't think so. Is he your third line center? Maybe. Or is he a third line right winger? I don't know. But let's just say that this is their top line right now. Peterka, Zacha, Pasternak. Now, sure, you can tinker with that. Maybe it's Geeky instead of Peterka. I don't know. But just bear with me here. So Peterka, Zacha, Pasternak. And then what's your second line? Is it Minton centering Hagens and Geeky? Do you want Minton and Hagens both playing center? Because I think we all want Hagens playing center at some point, but maybe it's not right away. I don't know, right? And then is it Husnudinov centering Lindholm and Middlestad? Is it Lindholm centering Middlestad and Husnudinov? Is Lucas Reichel in this situation? Is Lindholm in the top six? Not because we want that, but because maybe Marco Stern wants that. Like, is Hagens a winger? Is he a center? Is Minton a second line center or a third line center? Like, how does this forward core shake out? Where's Middlestad? Where's Reichel? Is Lindholm on IR? Like what happens here? And then the fourth line, it's like you have Jeannot, Corrali, and Kastelik. Is Corrali still there? Where's Matt Poitras fit into all of this? Like, I don't love these lines. Like Lindholm and Middlestad, I don't want either one in my middle six right now. So, but they're under contract. So, again, maybe there's some shoes to drop. I'll tell you what I do like about the Bruins forward core compared to last year is the addition of Peterka and the full-time addition of James Hagens. I know he's going to be a rookie and he's going to have to learn on the fly, but I still like his youth, speed, and skill set in this lineup compared to last year. You miss Arvidsson's speed and ability to get in on the forecheck and be a disruptor, right? So you're missing that. I don't know. It's just I feel like something's gonna change still. This can't be. It just doesn't make much sense. And I know some of you might say, well, maybe they'll keep Middlestad and maybe flip at the deadline for something next year. And maybe they do. But if there's one thing we know about the Bruins is that if they're in a playoff spot or fighting for one at the trade deadline, they're not going to just trade away somebody who's presumably been in their top 9 forward group. They just don't do it. You might want them to because you don't care about a one-and-done playoff appearance. But we all know the Bruins won't sacrifice this in the playoffs. So that could be a fatal flaw of theirs. But unless the Bruins suck next year, which they might, but unless they suck at the deadline and they're selling, I don't know. Do they trade Middlestad if they're in a playoff spot? Do they trade somebody else? Like, I don't know. And their plan's not to suck. So there's no way they're saying right now, oh yeah, if we don't trade Casey now, we'll just trade him at the deadline. Because they might be good. They might be good next year or at least competing for a playoff spot. And I don't think they'll move him then. So I don't know. This forward core just looks weird to me right now. There's not a lot of cohesion. And maybe the lines I read off aren't accurate. Maybe it's, who knows? Maybe it's Hagens centering Peterka and Pasternak. And then it's Zacha centering Geeky and, whomever. I don't know. Like, I really don't know. But I'm having a hard time putting together 3 top lines or a top 9 forward group that I'm like, yeah, I like that going into the year. Because Elias Lindholm and Casey Middlestad, they seem out of place right now. And is Lucas Reichel in Providence? Is he in Boston? Like, where's Alex Steves? Where's Asimont, Corrali? Like, I don't know. So where's Poitras? Like, right? So anyway, I do think the Bruins on paper are better than how they ended the season, but I don't know how it all comes together still. and the offseason's not done. In fact, it's just getting underway. But through July 1st, at least, they still look like a team that has to figure their shit out here, because it's not a roster on paper that I have very high hopes for in the Atlantic Division. But again, you have to play the games. But for now, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. Let me know what you thought of the Bruins day one of free agency, the trades that they made, where you think they might still be heading this offseason, and just your general thoughts on the team. So thank you all very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week. Enjoy your 4th of July holiday as well. Be safe, and I'll talk to you soon.